It is 2:51 a.m. The Gulf of Oman, 290 nautical miles southeast of the Strait of Hormuz, in international waters that no court and no treaty and no unilateral declaration by any government in Tehran has ever successfully restricted from free navigation by any vessel of any flag. The water here is 3,100 meters deep, far deeper than the Persian Gulf proper, deep enough that the acoustic environment favors the patient and the prepared over the hasty and the reactive. The sky is clear. A three-quarter moon is visible to the southwest, low on the horizon, casting enough light to silver the wave tops without illuminating anything useful about what is happening below the surface or in the airspace above it. The sea state is 2. Wind from the northwest at 9 knots. Temperature 28 degrees Celsius at the surface. It is, in every meteorological sense, a quiet night on a calm sea. USS George Washington, CVN-73, is operating in a modified racetrack pattern at the center of her strike group, having completed her last launch cycle 47 minutes ago. Her flight deck is in a reduced operations posture, aircraft respotted, fuel lines secured, the controlled choreography of night flight operations replaced by the quieter but no less disciplined rhythm of a carrier between cycles. She is not defenseless between cycles. She is never defenseless. But the particular state of heightened attention that characterizes an active launch and recovery sequence has settled, fractionally, into the alert readiness of a ship that is watching and waiting between operational surges. The watch team in her Combat Information Center is fully manned. The Aegis combat system is in full active mode. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye that has been on station 90 nautical miles to the northwest since 11:30 p.m. is completing its third orbit of the current patrol cycle. Its AN/APY-9 radar rotating continuously, feeding track data on everything within 300 nautical miles into the Link 16 network, shared by every ship and aircraft in the strike group. Everything in the Gulf of Oman tonight is being watched. That is not a figure of speech. It is a precise operational description of the sensor architecture surrounding USS George Washington at this moment, and it is the reason that what is about to happen from the Iranian coast is going to end very differently than the people who planned it expect. At 2:51 a.m., an underground launch facility carved into the Makran coastal mountain range in Sistan-Baluchistan province, Iran, a hardened complex that Iranian state media has never publicly acknowledged and that American intelligence has known about for 4 years, received the final launch authorization. The authorization had been in preparation for 11 days. The targeting solution had been updated 3 hours ago using a combination of commercial satellite imagery and signals intelligence intercepts that Iran's intelligence directorate assessed as providing sufficient confidence in the carrier's projected position. The weapon system loaded and ready in that facility is the Qadr cruise missile, Iran's most advanced land attack and anti-ship cruise missile, derived from the Shahab ballistic missile family's technology base, but configured as a turbojet-powered, terrain-following weapon with a claimed range of 2,000 kilometers and a warhead of approximately 750 kilograms of high explosive. Iranian state media has described the Qadr as capable of operating at very low altitude, to avoid radar detection, as equipped with a precision navigation system that combines inertial navigation with satellite guidance, and as Iran's most credible long-range precision strike asset. They are going to fire 6 of them tonight. Let us discuss the Qadr's actual capabilities, because the gap between the Iranian government's public description of this weapon and its real operational performance is, like so many gaps in Iranian military procurement, best understood through the physics of the problem rather than the politics of the announcement. The Qadr is a real cruise missile. It is not fictitious. It flies. It navigates. It carries a warhead capable of causing significant damage to an unprotected surface ship if it reaches its target. These things are true. What is also true is that a cruise missile traveling at subsonic speed, the Qadr's turbojet achieves approximately Mach 0.8 at sea level, covers 2,000 kilometers in approximately 2 hours and 45 minutes. During those 2 hours and 45 minutes, the missile is continuously emitting a radar cross-section that, while reduced by its design, is detectable at useful ranges by modern airborne and shipborne radar systems. It is transmitting navigation signals. It is generating engine noise. It is present in the electromagnetic spectrum in ways that the AN/APY-9 radar aboard an E-2D Hawkeye, the AN/SPY-1D radar aboard an Aegis destroyer, and the passive detection systems distributed throughout the strike group's defensive architecture were specifically designed and continuously refined to detect. A Qadr missile at 50 meters altitude and Mach 0.8, approaching from the northwest across the Gulf of Oman, is not an invisible threat. It is a trackable, engageable threat, one that requires a competent defensive response, which the George Washington Strike Group is fully prepared to provide. The question is not whether the Qadr can be detected. It can. The question is whether 6 of them, fired in a specific time sequence from a hardened coastal facility, can saturate the defensive engagement capacity of a carrier strike group before at least one warhead reaches the carrier. This is the calculation that the Iranian planners made. This is what 11 days of preparation were in service of. The calculation is wrong, but the people who made it will not understand why for approximately 34 more minutes. At 2:51:38 a.m. SBIRS, the space-based infrared system, the constellation of military satellites that detects ballistic and cruise missile launches by their motor exhaust infrared signature, registered the first launch event from the Makran coastal complex. Turbojet cruise missiles do not generate the dramatic infrared signature of a ballistic missile booster. Their launch signature is smaller, briefer, and more easily confused with other thermal events. But SBIRS has been refined over decades specifically to detect exactly this kind of low-signature event, and the 6 launches that occurred between 2:51:38 a.m. and 2:54:12 a.m., staggered at intervals calculated to produce arrival at the target area within a compressed 90-second window, were detected and uplinked to the tactical network within 11 seconds of the first launch. 11 seconds. The Qadr missiles had been in the air for 11 seconds when the E-2D Hawkeye crew, USS Bunker Hill's CIC team, and the George Washington's Combat Watch team all received the same data simultaneously. 6 cruise missile launches from the Makran coast, bearing 317, estimated flight time to the carrier's projected position approximately 2 hours and 18 minutes at Mach 0.8. The early warning was not close in time. It was early enough to conduct a deliberate, methodical, defensive preparation that left nothing unplanned and nothing to improvisation. The strike group commander, a vice admiral with 30 years in naval aviation, currently embarked aboard George Washington, and in the CYC, within 4 minutes of the SBIRS alert reaching his staff, looked at the picture with the focused calm of a man who had been briefed on exactly this threat scenario 11 days ago, when the intelligence on the Makran facility's launch preparation first crossed his desk. He had spent 11 days thinking about how this engagement would unfold if the Iranians chose to execute. He had made decisions, asset positioning decisions, weapon load decisions, coordination decisions, that reflected that thinking. He was not surprised by the 6 missile tracks on his display. He was, in the specific professional way of a commander who has prepared thoroughly for an event and watched it begin to unfold according to plan. Ready. "Get the Hawkeye repositioned to the northwest intercept bearing," he said. "I want SM-2 solutions built on all 6 tracks before they cross the 200-mile line. And get me the Air Wing duty officer." The E-2D was already maneuvering. Its crew had received the SBIRS data simultaneously with the CIC and had begun repositioning without waiting for orders, because the E-2D crew had also been briefed 11 days ago, had also thought through this scenario, and knew exactly what repositioning needed to happen to optimize their radar coverage of the incoming tracks. USS Bunker Hill, CG-52, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser operating 14 nautical miles off George Washington's port bow, had shifted her AN/SPY-1D to the threat bearing within 90 seconds of the SBIRS alert. By 2:54 a.m., her Aegis fire control system had preliminary track solutions on all 6 inbound Qadr missiles. The tracks were not yet precise. The missiles were 600 nautical miles away and at low altitude, below the direct radar horizon of a surface ship at that range. Their radar returns available only through the data link from the E-2D operating at altitude. But the preliminary solutions were sufficient to begin computing intercept geometries and prepositioning the engagement plan. USS Chunghoon, DDG-93, and USS Farragut, DDG-99, the 2 Arleigh Burke destroyers in the inner screen, were assigned their engagement sectors by the TAO aboard George Washington at 2:58 a.m. Chunghoon owned the northwestern sector, the 3 Qadr missiles approaching on bearings between 305 and 320. Farragut owned the northeastern sector, the 3 missiles approaching on bearings between 320 and 335. The sector assignment prevented duplication of engagement effort and ensured that every inbound track had a designated engagement ship without any track falling into a coverage gap between sector boundaries. The assignments were made 2 hours and 14 minutes before the first Qadr was projected to arrive in engagement range. This is what preparedness looks like. At 3:22 a.m., 31 minutes after the launches, and approximately 1 hour and 47 minutes before the first projected impact, 2 A-18F Super Hornets from VFA-11 launched from George Washington's flight deck. They were not launched for air superiority. They were launched carrying AN/ASQ 228A TFLIR targeting pods and AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles, tasked with an airborne intercept evolution that would bring them to a position 140 nautical miles northwest of the carrier, ahead of the SM-2 engagement envelope in the approach corridor of the inbound Qadr missiles, where they could conduct a forward intercept pass. The F/A-18F's AN/APG-79 AESA radar in air-to-surface mode can detect a cruise missile-sized target at useful engagement ranges, and the AIM-120D's Mach 4 speed and 100-plus nautical mile range give an F/A-18F a genuine intercept capability against subsonic cruise missiles in a head-on geometry. This was the outer engagement layer. Two fighters, 140 miles northwest of the carrier, positioned to attrite the Qadr formation before it reached the SM-2 engagement envelope. If the fighters achieved even 2 or 3 intercepts, the 6-missile saturation attack became a 4 or 3 missile attack, manageable for the SM-2 layer below. If the fighters achieved all 6 intercepts, the SM-2 layer would not need to fire. In either case, the defensive depth was working as designed, multiple engagement opportunities at multiple ranges, each one reducing the residual threat that the next layer would need to address. The F/A-18Fs reached their intercept station at 4:03 a.m. The E-2D was providing them a continuous data link picture of all 6 Qadr tracks, updated every 6 seconds. The missiles were subsonic, flying at approximately 50 to 80 meters above the sea surface, their navigation systems maintaining the terrain-following profile that is supposed to make them difficult to detect from surface radars. From 28,000 feet, looking down at sea-skimming missiles crossing a flat ocean surface, the AN/APG-79 radar has no terrain masking to contend with. The first Qadr contact appeared on the lead F/A-18F's radar at 4:07 a.m., range 68 nautical miles, bearing 314. The second appeared 4 seconds later, 71 miles, bearing 319. All 6 were in track within 90 seconds. The lead pilot pickled the first AIM-120D at 4:09 a.m. In the E-2D's data link feed, the launch was marked automatically. The AIM-120D accelerated to Mach 4 and began its radar-guided intercept run against the lead Qadr missile. The closing geometry, Mach 4 interceptor against Mach 0.8 target, head-on, produced a closing rate of approximately 1,600 knots. Time from launch to intercept, 84 seconds. The first Qadr was eliminated from the battle space at 4:10:31 a.m., 170 nautical miles northwest of USS George Washington. The wingman fired 11 seconds after the lead. His AIM-120D intercepted the second Qadr at 4:10:44 a.m. Both fighters reloaded their targeting solutions and fired again. Lead against the third track, wingman against the fourth. Third intercept at 4:12 and 1 seconds a.m. Fourth at 4:12:18 a.m. 4 Qadr missiles eliminated by 2 F/A-18Fs in 3 minutes and 47 seconds. The fifth and sixth missiles, the trailing pair, flying 90 seconds behind the lead group, were still 140 nautical miles from the carrier and 68 nautical miles from the fighter's current position. The fighters had enough fuel and missile inventory for another engagement pass. At 4:14 a.m., the strike group commander authorized the fighters to execute a second intercept run. They accelerated northwest their radars already tracking the 5th and 6th Qadr contacts. The 5th AIM-120D launched at 4:16 a.m., the 6th at 4:19 a.m. Both missiles were guiding against their targets, both in terminal acquisition, both seconds from intercept. The 5th Qadr was eliminated at 4:17 and 3 seconds a.m. The 6th, the last surviving weapon from a salvo of 6 that had left the Makran facility 1 hour and 25 minutes earlier, was eliminated at 4:17:22 a.m., 133 nautical miles northwest of USS George Washington. 6 Qadr cruise missiles, 6 intercepts, all of them in the outer fighter engagement layer, 130 to 170 nautical miles from the carrier. The SM-2 engagement layer aboard USS Bunker Hill, and the 2 destroyers, whose crews had spent the previous hour and 26 minutes building and continuously refining engagement solutions for all 6 tracks, never fired a single round. They had been prepared to fire. Their fire control solutions were ready. Their weapons were pre-positioned in the engagement sequence. They simply were not needed because the outer engagement layer had been comprehensive. In the CIC aboard George Washington, the watch team logged the 6th intercept confirmation at 4:17:31 a.m. The strike group commander reviewed the engagement summary that was already being compiled. 6 launches detected at 2:51 a.m. Outer layer intercept evolution completed at 4:17 a.m. 0 residual tracks. Carrier flight deck clear to resume operations. He picked up his coffee. He looked at the tactical display for a long moment. Notify the Air Wing duty officer that the recovery cycle can proceed as scheduled, he said, and get me the post-engagement intelligence package started. I want the Makran facility's emission signature from the launch sequence in the report within the hour. The launch sequence emissions from the Makran facility, the radar activations, the communication traffic, the power consumption spikes, the telemetry associated with 6 Qadr missiles initializing their navigation systems, had been collected in their entirety by signals intelligence assets that were in position before the first missile left its launcher. The data was already being processed. By 6 a.m., it would be in an intelligence report that would tell American planners more about the Qadr's actual operational performance parameters, its radar cross-section at various altitudes, its navigation update cycle, its terminal seeker activation range, than anything they had previously had access to. The engagement had not merely defended the carrier. It had generated intelligence. The 6 Qadr missiles that Iran had expended tonight had paid for their own technical assessment. The recovery cycle for George Washington's airborne aircraft began at 4:31 a.m., exactly as the schedule called for. The 2 A-18Fs that had conducted the intercept evolution landed aboard at 4:44 a.m. and 4:46 a.m., respectively. Their pilots were debriefed by the air intelligence officer before they left the ready room. The debrief was professional, detailed, and conducted in the tone of 2 aviators describing a training evolution that had gone exactly as planned, because from their perspective, it had. They had been positioned correctly, given excellent data from the E-2D, fired their missiles at targets their radar had clearly acquired, and observed 6 intercept confirmations. There had been no confusion, no uncertainty, no moment when the outcome had been in doubt. This is the strategic reality of Iranian cruise missile employment against a prepared American carrier strike group in 2025. The Qadr is a real weapon. It flies at low altitude. It has a meaningful warhead. It was designed by engineers who understood, at least in principle, what characteristics a successful anti-ship cruise missile needs to possess. But it flies at Mach 0.8. It takes nearly 2 hours and 20 minutes to cover the distance between the Makran coast and a carrier operating in the central Gulf of Oman. And 2 hours and 20 minutes with a strike group that was warned within 11 seconds of launch by a satellite constellation that does not sleep is enough time to build a comprehensive fighter intercept evolution, position 2, FA-18Fs 140 miles from the carrier, and eliminate every incoming track before it comes close to the SM-2 engagement envelope, let alone the carrier itself. The Qadr's designers made the same mistake that every adversary eventually makes when planning anti-carrier operations. They optimized their weapon against the defensive architecture of a previous era. The low-altitude profile defeats surface radar in the geometry of 1990s surface ship sensor suites. It does not defeat an E-2D at altitude, whose radar looks down at sea-skimming missiles crossing an open ocean, or FA-18Fs carrying AIM-120Ds, whose Mach 4 speed turns a 2-hour cruise missile flight into a 90-second intercept problem. The sensor fusion, the data link, the outer fighter layer, these are not afterthoughts. They are the answer to exactly this threat, built deliberately, tested extensively, and demonstrated tonight against 6 Iranian cruise missiles that found 6 American interceptors waiting for them in the dark. USS George Washington flew her scheduled combat air patrol cycle at dawn. The Gulf of Oman was quiet. The Makran facility, having expended 6 of its most capable weapons for no result, was quiet too. Somewhere in a report that Iran's military leadership would read before breakfast, someone would have to explain why 6 Qadr missiles had failed to reach a carrier that the targeting solution said they should have been able to find. The answer was simple. The carrier was defended by a system that was better than the weapon. And it always has been. Bye for now.